So I have some more to talk about, more to add to my coverage of this ongoing robbery in progress, this corporate heist that has been going on since COVID started. And these numbers are these numbers are jaw-dropping because it shows you that this isn't it gives it a good picture about what's actually going on, because it's easy to get caught up in one side of the equation, the side of people hurting badly during this economic crisis. Like I said, I always say worst economic crisis in history. So it's easy to get wrapped up in the numbers of that. The wrapped up in the numbers of the 60 million people who lost their job, and the 60% of businesses that closed because of COVID are going to be closed permanently, and the 40 million people about to be evicted. It's because those numbers by themselves, those numbers are just impossible to wrap your head around. So it's easy to see that and be floored by that. But something that's equally as stunning is the fact that the rich are making out like fucking bandits while this is all going on. And it shows that this isn't happening by accident. This is by design, and the system is rigged, and it's working for the people who rigged it. It's working how it's supposed to work. The government is doing what they're paid to do, paid by the rich and the corporations. They're doing what they're paid to do. And if you take a step back, everything is working the way that they planned it. But the problem is, the way that they planned it is to fuck over everybody in the country and let the rich make out like bandits. And that's just untenable. That's unacceptable. Like I said, the 60 million people unemployed have no way of putting food on their table. 40 million people about to be evicted. Months behind on rent. Months. 3, 4, 5, 6 months behind on rent. Behind on utilities. Behind on their car payments. People are in a hole that they could never get out of on their own. And that is by design, because you look at the numbers, just the billionaires alone, since COVID started, the billionaire class in this country have made over $637 billion in wealth. They've increased that in their wealth. It wasn't like they started at zero. Oh, would you look at that? $630 billion in their pocket. No, they were already billionaires before COVID, and they've made $637 billion on top of it. Jeff Bezos alone, $48 billion in 8 months during the worst economic crisis in history. So it's a bigger slap in the face than when, like with the Great Depression, everybody felt it. Everybody got it. Everybody got out their ass. Everybody got hurt by it, even though it was caused by speculation and it was driven by the recklessness of investors and things like that. Even though that was the case, everybody felt it. And you remember the stories about them doing suicide on Wall Street because they lost all their money and all this stuff. So everybody felt it. The poor definitely felt it worse. Definitely. But everybody felt it. But this, it shows you that the pain and devastation that people are feeling across the country, that millions of people are feeling across the country, the working class is feeling. And the only reason it's happening is so that the rich can make out like bandits. I'm going to get into some of these numbers, but first, you guys already know the deal. I love doing the show for you guys, but in order for me to keep doing it, it needs to be sustainable. So if you guys can help contribute to the show through Patreon, I have a link to my Patreon account in the about page of my YouTube channel. I also have a link to my PayPal in the about page of my YouTube channel if you feel more comfortable doing a one-time contribution. And any amount helps. And I'm extremely grateful for all the people who've contributed over the last few weeks and the last few months. Because like many of you guys, I lost my job when this happened. And so I'm extremely grateful for all the whatever you guys can do to help contribute. Now, back to this story. Like I said, the billionaires in this country alone have made over $637 billion since COVID started. They've increased their wealth by that much. Almost $1 trillion. And these are just the billionaires. Even smaller than a smaller percentage of the country than the millionaires. So when you factor in the millionaires and how much they've increased their wealth, I'm sure the number is way over $1 trillion. We're told there's no money for healthcare. You get sick, you go bankrupt, you die. We're told we can't do anything to support the public if you lost your job. Again, you have no money to put food on your table. Well, you can wait outside of miles long outside of food banks in every single city across the country. Maybe you can get some food for your family. Oh, you don't have money for rent. I don't know what to tell you. The police are going to be there to serve you an eviction and throw your ass out on the street soon. So I guess you have to figure something out. All while that's happening, damn near $1 trillion goes to the billionaires in this country. So I can't even fathom a rationalization, whatever type of mental gymnastics you can fantasize about, where you can justify any type of economic system that allows that to happen. I don't care if you are the so-called biggest libertarian or free market believer capitalist out there. There's no way you can support what's happening and say this is right. Yes, this is exactly how an economic system should function. Because at that point, you're just a fucking ideologue. Either that or you're just greedy and you want to justify getting all the money for yourself. But that's not a rational position to take, because that's not sustainable. That is not tenable. The country is falling apart. The states, on top of the crisis of people just not having money to support their families, not to keep a roof over their heads, to put food on the table. On top of that crisis, you have states and localities completely out of money. They have no money because when shit shut down, when the economy crashed, they lost a bunch of revenue. They don't get to collect income tax if people aren't making an income. They don't get to collect sales tax if all the businesses are closed and if nobody has any money to go out and spend money. So local governments gutted, cannot operate. The MTA in New York, which was already shit, public transit was already shit. They're going to have to cut a third of their workforce, a third. Public transportation in New York is going to be damn near unusable, because they don't have enough money. They're doing cuts to EMTs and to public education, firing a bunch of teachers because they can't afford them. So this economic system is unsustainable. And I cannot, like I said, I cannot fathom an argument where anybody can justify this, where anybody can say that this is correct, this is how it should be, and, let the chips fall where they may, but, we can't interfere. I cannot understand an argument like that at this point. Now, let's get into some more of this obscene wealth. Jeff Bezos made $48 billion from March to June. From March to June. You can't even come close to spending that much money in your lifetime. But that's how much he made from March to June, on top of the billions he already had as the richest man on the planet. Again, I would love for somebody to try to justify this. I would be reading the comment section and I'll be fingers crossed somebody can make this make sense for me. Now that's Jeff Bezos. $48 billion from March to June, and God knows how much he's made since then. Elon Musk made $17 billion since March. Sheldon Adelson, owner of casinos, somehow he's making out like a bandit too. While casinos are at a record low number of people are going to casinos, still Sheldon Adelson made $5 billion. He didn't take a loss. He added $5 billion to his wealth. So here's my hot take on this whole thing. None of them should have increased their net worth a goddamn penny. And that may sound extreme, that may sound radical. Who cares? Who cares? They already have more money than they can spend in their lifetime or in 10, 20, 100 lifetimes. Jeff Bezos was before this, was already worth well over $100 billion. If millions of people have gone without jobs for 6 months and have gone without any income for the last 6 months and have been trying to scrape by with however they can, if they can do it, I'm not going to shed a fucking tear if Jeff Bezos didn't make another cent during this entire crisis. I won't, because he's doing just fine. He has more money than he can possibly spend. And I'm not one of those people who say, I'm definitely not a communist and says, oh, everybody should just make an equal amount. Okay, say people make there's varying degrees to how much people make. But there is no earthly explanation why anybody should have $100 billion and then almost double their wealth in the middle of a crisis. There is no earthly explanation for that. I'm not even one of those people who says, who worries about the debt and the deficit. But even if you were one of those people, definitely all that money that these billionaires and these executives, these millionaires have made through the crisis, that should have been taxed at 100% by the government. And that money should be reallocated to pay for emergency programs like a UBI, like Medicare for All. Because like I said, we're in an emergency, we're in a crisis. And that is just money gratuitously going to the richest people in the fucking world. Again, while the country is collapsing, while everything's falling off the rails. So if we lived in a world that makes sense, yes, that money would have been taxed at 100%. And then, yes, you should also tax the rest of the wealth that they're hoarding. But also, just MMT, modern monetary theory. The government creates their own currency. We print our own currency, print our own money. So if they needed to print more money, if they needed to do deficit spending, then so be it. Because it is an investment in the economy. You're going to get that money back eventually. It's not like you give, say it costs $3 trillion, $4 trillion to give everybody a $2,000 check for 6 months, 8 months, however long it is. All that money, it's not like people are going to take that money for 8 months and just hoard it in their bank account and never spend it, and it's never going to see the light of day. They're just going to be sitting on $16,000 cash. They're going to spend that money. They're going to put it in the economy. That is going to keep the economy running. It'll probably be a boost to the economy because people would have more money to spend than they normally would. So it makes all the sense in the world in the middle of an economic crisis to give people money. What doesn't make sense is giving hundreds of billions of dollars to people who are already billionaires, who are already sitting on more money than they could possibly spend in their life. It makes absolutely no sense to give them almost $1 trillion for them to just sit on it, for them to just hoard it, while there are lines in every single city in this country, miles and miles and miles long, of people waiting in line at food banks because they can't afford to feed their parents. That should not be a thing while 40 million people are on the brink of eviction and homelessness. That shouldn't be a thing. But I'm sound like a broken record on this thing every time I talk about it, because I still, and maybe this is just evidence of my intellectual capacity, but I still cannot find the words to adequately describe how outrageous and how obscene this situation is. And I cannot, I keep trying to come up with different ways, different colorful and exciting ways to get this across to people, how unacceptable this entire situation is. But I'm just at a loss for words. I cannot. in my vocabulary, I cannot string together the words that make a compelling enough case to explain how outrageous and outlandish this entire thing is. So I sound like a broken record. Second verse, same as the first. And this is just, we're living in a failed state. We're living in a failed state where the government is going to leave the public for dead, abdicate their responsibility to provide assistance in a crisis, all in service of their corporate donors, and let them run out the back door with all the money. And whatever happens to the country, however deep and lasting the ramification of this neglect that they've overseen for the last 8 months, however bad the result is, they do not care. It's not like they're sitting there trying to frantically come up with a plan to help the public. No, they sit here and let this problem fester and compound over the last 8 months, not because they can't find a way to help people, not because they can't find a way to deal with this economic crisis. They've let it get this bad, and they're going to let it continue to get even worse than we can imagine because they don't care. Their top priority, their first, second, and third priority is helping the rich make more money. Nancy Pelosi, she's almost doubled her net worth over the last couple years, over the last 10 years. She's 100 millionaire. So she's in there getting rich off of all this herself. All these politicians, they're in there self-serving and serving their donors, and helping the public isn't even a fucking fleeting thought that crosses their mind. They aren't even concerned with it. So you guys already know, direct action, public pressure campaigns, protests in the street. That's the only way. That is the only way they will ever consider doing anything, is if people force their hand to do it. But this is unacceptable. Nobody should be accepting this. Nobody.